time to start because it's just hour and 45 minutes. Welcome all to this fourth lecture of Facilitating Change course. This time it's just me and Chiara, so Chiara will take care of the Zoom operations, and it's me lecturing and taking part of the facilitation of this part. So Rista is this time have some family business in Norway, so not attending this week, but hopefully it's okay for you. Today we are in a kind of turning point of the course, so we start the latter part. Still 2 exercises, and after this lecture 2 lectures still to go. And I will go a little more in detail to this lecture after recap. So you have had an exercise continuing the first and second one, so the third one continued to deepen how to define goals and how to clarify the goals for change. And you have done this dump exercise, so I will raise some points from this exercise and this dump still as a recap. And so in a way it has been very logical process, starting with this onion model and then going to taking temporal aspects in, and then evaluating and fine-tuning the goals through this dump criteria. And pretty much for facilitation, it has been using these tools to help another to clarify the goals and make it more precise, and then you have reflected the results. About the goals, it was pretty much of this. So Rista had last time this slide as an illustration or an example of how to make the goals more precise, more tangible, more, let's say, measurable as well. So and it sometimes can be that we have quite vague or loose goals descriptions that are very, can be interpreted in many ways, so they are not very precise. And here it was also mentioned that the goal is the point and dump is just a tool to fine-tune and make the goal better. So evaluate, assess how doable, how understandable, how measurable, how beneficial the goal defined is, and if it isn't, then how to do it as such, how to define that it can be it's kind of valid against these criteria. And now when looking your responses, it seems that that this dump tool was useful for many of you. So it's kind of helpful to assess the goal from multiple view angles and also fine-tune it. And as a simple tool, it was easy to use, but really hard to respond for some. So and so it really somehow could you think more in a deeper way and more through the and define, assess the goal from multiple perspectives, and also somehow to evaluate this kind of underlying assumptions in a new way, and it somehow revealed some of those underlying assumptions in a good way. And so it's when we think about the goals, we can think that they can be kind of required state of affairs in a way that it's somehow describing what we want, and then of course from this perspective they are kind of fixed that okay, this is our goal and we don't change it, we just go through it and of course, having this kind of goals can sometimes be tricky because it's a kind of living world where we don't have all the facts in the beginning or all the presumptions. But of course, it also channels our energy. But then goals are also for communication. And they are kind of communicative tools in a way that if we want to desire to do something, achieve something, then we start building it together, so making meanings. And it's possible to, and of course, important to use them as a kind of communication tool. But I would argue that it's in both ways that and it's somehow also difficult. Some difficulty between these two, but balancing as well, because when we start doing change project, we must have some kind of idea where to go. But having a very rigid or definite goals sometimes tricky because the reality starts relieving itself when we start doing things. So we start learning, and it's kind of unfolding. That the reality start to unfold in a way, and that way, I think it's good to have a kind of continuous assessment. Are the goals still valid, or should we fine tune somehow based on our new understanding? But of course, this kind of continuous communication, sense making, meaning making with the goals, and having this kind of stretch that there is a vision, direction, but we can then make it more concrete through our learning. But on the other hand, having some, let's say, so-called fixed timelines, deadlines, and also something we can quantify, it's very useful, because then we can measure it, and that's also sharpening our focus and of course creating pressure that we had to really achieve that. And as a facilitator, when we are talking about we can in a way pendle between these two aspects. Some of you realized or wrote in your reflection that the difficult M, and this is Risto's slide also from this phenomenon that how to measure really, that it's maybe the most difficult part of these dumb criteria. Okay, now he argues, I'm using his slide, he argues that it's about, because when we start to talk about the measurability of the things, then it starts to reveal some underlying assumptions. And also we have to quite often start stretching our comfort zones. And that makes it difficult in a way, because there is, when we have a vague, let's say, goals, we can explain later easier, or it also reveals our certain ways of thinking, maybe our attitudes, who's accountable, how we make decisions based on data or gut feeling, because we have certain things are already somehow, so we have some routinized ways of doing things, and also we have assumptions and practices and so on, and in many times those are a little bit let's say not so defined, and there's this kind of flexibility. And when we start to kind of creating tight goals and thinking about the measures, then we have to take responsibility in a different way. And of course, how to get data, and there is less room for explaining, and of course that makes things tighter, and it's not always comfortable. And so that's and can also question that this kind of power relations somehow. So start revealing, but I think this is part of every change process, that this kind of basic assumptions start to become visible, because change quite often must happen in those. And then, okay, here are the kind of 7 issues we can encounter when we facilitate this kind of goals and use this dump tool. Okay, I don't think I'm using more of this, but it was also very nice to read that some of you realized that this continuum was very, in a way, revealing, and these 3 exercises combined was a kind of good whole already. I would suggest if you have further questions concerning a dump and this smart and goals, we can discuss next week's furthermore. But I'd like now to go to this actual topic of the day. And the topic is facilitation in depth, meaning that we take a deeper dive to the social process and social elements of the facilitation. So what's happening and how can we really add probability that we are successful in our facilitation. So first, a few basic things, and then we will have our first group discussion already. And based on your experiences, what do you think now? What are kind of criteria for success or elements or preconditions for successful facilitation? And then building on that, we talk about facilitation process, its elements, and then connect it to this, what was discussed last time about this reification and the participation and meaning making there between. After the break, we go more through this facilitation process. So what are the kind of how we can add probability for success? And I like to talk about probabilities because it's not the certainty business. It's more probability business. So when we talk about the chains and doing it right, we can add probability strongly that we are successful, but we can never be 100% sure. So that's why this. And then in the latter part of the lecture, we will have other discussion in same groups, and then you can build more of your personal insights and your further thinking of what is your kind of profile as a facilitator. And then finally, wrap up and assignment, and we will close 1800. So I hope you can all stay with us through this, and also participate in these group sessions. But okay, let's go further now, and then the first thing, we are talking about facilitation very fluently here, but we haven't really defined what we mean by facilitation. And dictionary says that to facilitate is somehow to enable, the act of making something easier. So in facilis is easy in Latin, and so that's something that makes smoother, it makes easier things, and of course there's multiple meanings in various contexts, but I think this is in organizational context. When we talk about organizational change, this is something that is making things easier. We just use some kind of organizational work process, and it's connected pretty much to collective meaning making, decision making, problem solving, conflict resolution, learning, experimentations, ideation, development, change, transformation, reflection. So all kind of conversational process where we have to make meaning, quite often in a complex situation or in chains, or when we have to have a good level, good quality communication, produce some new ideas together. Then kind of facilitation as an outsider or kind of leader who is leading the situation can have this kind of facilitation approach, facilitative approach, how to do it. but we will discuss a little bit more about this, why this kind of outsider, neutral, specific facilitation role is useful in many occasions, or helpful. So there are, of course, wide variety of situation and setting, as discussed already. And of course, as facilitators, we sometimes can have fortune or that we are lucky that we end up being facilitating a very kind of highly positive or enthusiastic group of people who is doing some innovation workshop, and there is a very good atmosphere from start and throughout the process. So that's kind of nice context for facilitation. But then in many occasions, there are more challenging situations where there is more, let's say, conflictual or emotional stuff involved. So different views, different opinions, and different stakeholders should make sense, should have a good communication together. And then, of course, it's more demanding also for the facilitator how to create the situation, how to enable the discussion, and how to lead the process through that there is a good outcome, good encounters, positive kind of change or turn. And of course, there can be smaller teams, let's say a few people, even a pair, two persons having a conversation that can be facilitated as well as not from kind of by an outsider. But then it can involve hundreds of people. And actually, this last lecture, Risto mentioned this Halton company that they have had very participatory process concerning their was it strategy or values, but anyway, and then it was kind of example of this participation part and the reification. So the output can be very simple, and of course you can say that, okay, this kind of strategy or value list would have been produced easily by one person or two persons, so a small team. Why to have 100 people to participate? But then the process is the point, and ownership, and that you are contributing, that you are involved and included. And here the latter, this lower picture is, and I mentioned last lecture that I had a opportunity 10 years ago I was invited to participate and to become a facilitator of this kind of quite large process in city of Espoo, where they wanted to define their kind of cornerstones of their leadership in the whole organization. So it was a new mayor then who wanted to start discussing what's good leadership in Espoo, and he had an idea of this kind of participatory process. And we created a process where we started from the management team of the city, just 6 persons, and talking about what good leadership for them. And it was actually the first time they discussed together, actually, what is good leadership, what they define. And then we created a first draft of this kind of guidelines. What's good leadership? What do you think about that? And next stage was that we invited 60 next layer directors, some 60 people together, and continued the elaboration of these guidelines with them. And of course, we took basis for the management team's version, and then we started to discuss with 60 people, and we had 10. I think we had 10 group tables, and it was kind of 2-3 hour workshop, and we generated more stuff and criticized, and then based on that we elaborated the next version, and then we invited 800 people. This lower picture here to ice hockey arena, and we had this kind of 800 people dialogue on good leadership in city of Espoo based on these preliminary ideas, and it was facilitated by these 60 directors. And they facilitated in pairs, 25 people cohorts, and these cohorts were divided in 5-person groups. It was kind of bonfire group, talking about good leadership in 5-person groups. And then they generated ideas or criticized and added elements to this. And then based on this, we elaborated the let's say final draft of the cornerstones. And it was interesting. I did some research. We asked people how they felt this process and the participation. And of course, when calling all managers in the same spot, there were many doubtful thoughts at the first that what's the point? Is it that kind of theater scene or something like that? But in the end, it was quite vast number of people felt that they really contributed, and they felt that it was good participation, and that was very interesting. But that's another story. There's many aspects why I would say that it was successful, because after that they had this arena every year. They created their strategy next year through this process and so on. And so it was kind of a practice they created. And how to facilitate this kind of large event, how to create a kind of spirit and so on. So that's one was very interesting experience as well. But just an illustration, an example that we can have a very participatory way of working with a kind of massive or very large group of people as well. And of course, this can be varying from professional practices to everyday conversations. And then, as it was said, that facilitation is making things easier. It can be seen also that it's kind of helping. So we help the group to make sense, make meanings, solve problems, find ideas, and so on. And when we think facilitation as helping, one aspect is neutrality. So I mean, as a facilitator, we have I think its point is to have a neutral stance concerning the content, because it's the participants who have ownership and have responsibility, that they have to find a solution and they have to find answers, responses to their own questions. And the neutral stance is then that the facilitator is taking care of the process, way of working, its boundaries, but not the content. And of course, here it's a blurring boundary sometimes. If we are very good experts in something we are facilitating, then we tempt to also say something about the content. But I think the basic principle is that the facilitation is from neutral position, neutral stance. So the facilitator guides and enables the collective conversational process from neutral, and so keeping in mind the purpose, boundaries, enabling dialogue, interaction, and also inclusive interaction and appropriate involvement. And it doesn't mean that everybody must say take airspace in the same way, but that everybody has possibility to say and contribute. And so that's one thing. And of course, there are related concepts like coaching, mentoring, counseling, process consultation, workplace mediation, and so forth. But what's the kind of common denominator to all this is this kind of helping position, helping stance, that all these are kind of helping roles, helping processes for development, for improvements, and for better conversations. And that's the point concerning the facilitation as helping. Okay, now I think it's time for us to take our first group discussion. So next 10 minutes, have a conversation and share ideas. What are your views? What all makes facilitation successful? What do you think now? Write a short summary to chat, and don't go away. Surrender yourself to have a good conversation with your colleagues. And Chiara will put you in groups for next 10 minutes. And let's be back then. Thanks, Room.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, now we are back. Thank you. for your. So now please save your list here. There is a good starts already, and I would like to give opportunity for some group now to tell something about your discussion. How did you generate your list? So what was the content? Anyone wanting to volunteer? What makes facilitation successful based on your experience and discussion?
Yes, hello, it's William here.
Okay, please. Stage is yours. What did you discuss?
Yeah, so let's see, I need to find my note. Alkanen and Ulrika Volinen. We started with having clear goals for the facilitation. So that's really a basis for everything, to know what the outcomes and outputs should be for the process or the single event. But then we also we talked about also like that the right people are also part of the process. So who knows about what, who should be participated into which kind of questions? All people are not like the best people for certain discussions. Still, we saw it very important to include like ideally all people in the organization into the facilitated process. But who can answer what? That's an important question. Who should be part of what part of the process? And then also we talked about the facilitator's competence. So both about being flexible, able to be flexible. Say in a situation there comes up information that needs to be addressed and the plan needs to be revised. But also the ability to bring structure. So without the facilitator, you don't have the structure. People just talk and it doesn't lead anywhere. So it's about balancing between structure and flexibility.
Indeed, I think you made very, very crucial points. So this purpose, why are we doing this? What's our goal? What's our aim in the event or workshop and so on? And then who will attend? And then as a facilitator, we have to be able to allow discussion, but also create a structure in a way. And we have to have a role where we can also create boundaries. That if somebody is taking too much airspace, we should have a kind of agreed principles that we can say, okay, that's a good point, but what about others? What do you think? And so that we can guide the discussion conversation. And also, if it go out of the tangent in a way or spin off, then we can, okay, that's very interesting topic. But today we are focusing on this, and maybe we can just put this idea slide and come back to this later. And so that that kind of thing. But okay, very good stuff. And as I'm reading here, you have generated good lists. We will come back to this lists later after the break. And then before the break, I would like to raise a couple of things concerning the process itself. And quite often when we talk about organizational transformation or facilitation, it's quite often that it's kind of single event session workshop point of view that we have to plan a workshop and so on. And so that's and having a kind of larger process or transformational process, or this my example of having it may be not facilitation anymore. Maybe it's a process consultation or change leading transformational process by large. So what are kind of all elements? But quite often, large transformations are advanced through single good events and encounters, and I think their core the facilitation can be very, very helpful there as a part of this larger transformation, but of course as a part of the single event. But I would always recommend to take facilitation as from process point of view, that it has some timeline, it has beginning, some before, and then beginning, and then the productive phase, and then the closing, and maybe same after work after that. So it's kind of process. And what are the elements in a process? It's happening in a context always. So in a way, understanding the requirements of the context and what are the kind of boundaries, or let's say cultural features, and maybe the maturity and so on. And so understanding that. And then, as was mentioned, there's always purpose and aims. If you have a kind of process, then there's a reason why we're having it, and it has some aimed outcome. And then participants, as William mentioned, that who are now appropriate people to come to this workshop, and it must serve the purpose, and also the expertise and the aims that who has appropriate knowledge, but also the roles concerning the purpose and aims. And sometimes it can concern the whole organization in some way, but of course it's not maybe a single event, or it sometimes can be like this example of 800 people workshop. Then, of course, what are the appropriate methods and approach? Because there is the different tools, different approaches, depending on the purpose and aim of the workshop or event. And then, of course, we as facilitators, we are part of the process. So what's our kind of way of being a facilitator? Are we fitting in very well? And are we a right person or personality? And of course, there is question of do we need to have expertise concerning the content? And that's sometimes it's helpful that we know something about what people talk about. But then we have temptation also that can sometimes that we get too much involved. And of course, one part is then that the purpose and aims, and in the end, what are the concrete outcomes and lived experience. And we will come back to this later. So concerning this outcome and experience, I will come back to Christos this community of practice picture, where the reification is the outcome, that we produce something, ideas, flip charts, canvas, whatever, and then we get something tangible. It's not just talking, but then the participation is creating an experience, and the experiential part is then I would argue that in change it's as important, and then what happens here in the middle, that we create meanings. So meaning making, communication, that we create the outcome, but also that we create meaningful experience where we also reflect on the experience. And now when we I would argue that we are very, very outcome focused in our organizations, that we are solving the problem, we are producing a strategy paper, we are getting new ideas and so on. And then we are happy when there is outcomes. And but I would argue that the participation is the lived experience, and the reification then concrete outcomes. And afterwards we give meanings to both, but the experience tends to produce more powerful memories and traces. And this experiences build culture. And that's then really a important part. And sometimes somebody can say that whatever method doesn't matter when the outcome is good, but the method, the way how we work together, build our experience and also our expectations for the future. So that's why I'm more tended to focus on a process and participation, and not just the methods and outcomes, but I think a good facilitator takes care of both sides. Okay, there's a couple of questions in from Katarina and Olga in chat. I will come back to those after the break. But now we have our 5-minute break. So let's be back 7 past. So let's have a 5-minute break. It's 2 past now. So time to continue. 5 minutes is pretty short, but hope you had a refreshing break. Okay, there's good points in chat. But before going to points, there was 2 questions here in the beginning. So Olga actually asked how can we validate that the criteria is understandable? Well, that's understandable. This is part of the communication. That when we are setting a goal, I think within a team, I think it's first thing that we have to discuss how we understand it, and then if we have other stakeholders concerning our project, then I think the only way is to discuss how they understand it, asking, and if they don't, then it's a good point, or they understand somewhat differently, then we have to define it even more. So that's from my point of view. We can guess, we can assume, but if we don't ask, then we have to test in a way. And Katarina asked about how do we identify and engage facilitators in temporary groups. I think when we are starting a kind of way of working where we need a facilitation, I think it's always fair and good to agree on roles and somehow define the situation that, okay, now we are a temporary group, we have to generate ideas. Do we need someone to somehow facilitate this way of working? Is someone volunteering or someone capable of doing that, and do we accept it? And so it's in every group. I think point is that we agree on roles, because this kind of sneaky facilitation that I try to secretly facilitate a little bit, it can sometimes work, but it can create a kind of odd feeling why that person is only asking questions and not really telling his or her ideas. And so that's then I think the open way of is I think always better to agree. And I really like Daniel's idea or this quote, people don't remember what you did, they remember the way you made them feel. And this is really a point, and that we tend to remember how we were treated by others, and what was the feeling, what was the atmosphere, what was the kind of and we seldom, and how was it to work with someone. We seldom remember the content anymore, and so that's something that is more fundamental for us. And there's also some research done in that what we choose, how do we choose, if you can freely choose, with whom do we work, with those people who are likable or those who are competent. And there's a kind of indication that people easily say that, okay, of course, the competent people, but we try to avoid in practice those jerks. If they feel us lousy and make us feel lousy, and it's somehow difficult to work with, then we are not so willing to work with that kind of people. But then these encounters build our kind of expectation about the next encounter. And sometimes it can happen that we have a lousy meeting every Monday morning, and it start to destroy our Sunday afternoon already, or Sunday evening, because we're thinking that we have that lousy meeting expectations for Monday morning. And so I think that's pretty much true, that how we encounter people, it leaves traces, and also the expectations for our next encounters, and that's why it's important. But okay, that's another story. Jussi has sent some Twitter link that maybe concern the same issue. But let us now go through this further on our agenda. So here's a kind of list what characterizes a good facilitation experience or good this kind of conversational process, and this may be connected to this discussion that started, that there's a kind of inclusive feel, that people feel that they are appreciated and they themselves as persons are appreciated and included, that in a way the process kind of invite, engage people, and somehow that connection and relatedness is built, and so those are pretty much connected. That we are productive as well. That there is new shared understanding, and also feeling of accomplishment. That we just talk. That it's not open-ended talk, but we end up having some results. I think that's one point, having this aim and purpose, and then in the end have feeling that we have accomplished something, and that there is a kind of feeling of meaningfulness. That was just not just a theory scene, but this was something real that was meaningful for us to proceed. And of course, at best, it's a kind of learning experience that there happens kind of emancipation, that afterwards we are more courageous or empowered in a way, that when we are doing this change, we feel that we generated good ideas and we feel ourselves as team more, let's say, capable of doing things. So feeling of self-efficacy, being more competent, capable afterwards. And this kind of supportive atmosphere, even in the moments of confusion. And that's maybe the when we have these tricky parts, we have some stuck moments, then we can proceed. And if we can then overcome those moments and tolerate that uncertainty, those can be very decisive moments in the process. And then of course that we create more commitment to proceed and so willingness to continue, and so that's this kind of elements. So of course these are very, very positive things, but I think the good facilitated process is really this kind of social accomplishment where we feel that we are. It's really supporting our efficacy feeling and our feeling of being productive. But then this togetherness and connection is also something that can be enhanced and strengthened. And as a facilitator, so facilitator is setting the tone pretty much. And if we are, well, maybe I have a little bias with this here, but I'm very kind of maybe even too understanding sometimes. But balancing this, that okay, we have to set boundaries and keep up those boundaries, but how to do that in an appreciative way, and how to be curious truly that everybody can contribute, and how to anyway to use appropriate kind of structures and tools in a way. But I would argue that tools are just helping methods. They are never kind of primary thing. And this kind of conversational process, this atmosphere, is more fundamental thing. But of course, when we are beginning our facilitation career or something like that, I think tools and methods are very, very good to structure the process. But then through that experience, we can start learning how to be adaptive, how to be flexible in a way, how to use those tools in an appropriate way that is not kind of strict always that, okay, these steps must be taken and otherwise we are not successful. And so learning that is I really recommend you to be prepared. Okay, let us now to go through more detail this process, and now you can compare your own ideas, what you generated in chat and your previous discussion. But before going there, I would argue that somehow when we are having a change process or change workshop, this workshop or session, it must express and represent the culture and values it's aiming to promote. And saying that, so we can't really build a dialogical culture through monological means. So meaning that if a leader states that, okay, I want us to be more communicative and more dialogical or more relational, and then having a monologue about that, I think it's a kind of oxymoron. So the process must represent the culture it tried to promote and values. And so that's one generic thing. But okay, facilitated process, adding probability for success. So what to do? What are the kind of stages? So first, the preparation, then getting started, maintaining flow, and closing and reflecting. I will now go all these through a bit more detailed. So I think the good preparation is important when we are willing to be successful. So one thing is knowing the context. So what is the situation, culture, why the session, tensions, touchy issues, dependencies, owner of the process, expectation. So if we are asked to be facilitator in a certain process, there is someone who is owning the process or asking us to be facilitator. So it's good to ask a little bit more about the situation and some of the expectations and if there's some who is attending and who should attend. So then the participants. So as it was mentioned that we know who should be there and why they are coming, what's their pre-knowledge, expectations, and how we prepare them. What is to be expected, and if we want them to be prepared, so that we are giving them time to prepare. And there is taking care of the pre-info, that the owner, it's not the facilitator who should info them, but it's the who's the owner of the project, at why we are having this workshop and what's expected. But discussing this, because sometimes I have been ending the situation where people don't know where they come from, why the workshop is arranged, and then we lose some time because it's a facilitator who start to explain easily that what's the situation, but then it's a little bit wrong role. I think it's always the owner or the leadership of the organization who must provide this pre-info. And okay, then ourselves. What's our presumptions, expectations, worries, being prepared? How can we prepare ourselves? What is our plan? What is our kind of maybe worries? Do I need a sparring partner if this, let's say, new and maybe a touchy, challenging situation for me? Is there someone I can discuss with beforehand? Then how to choose right methods and process. What is the proper method, and how to plan the process. And here, having this kind of detailed plan helps us to be flexible. And it's good to think about how to get a good start, what are kind of methods we are using, when to have breaks, what are maybe the critical moments if we have some pre-knowledge that, okay, this is a touchy issue that we know, okay, and what is the good, can we have a morning session or is the evening session? Are people tired? All kind of things we can think about, and that can also somehow influence the rhythm and how many breaks and my experience is that having a one-day intensive conversation workshop is quite tiring, and sometimes 3 hours is, for example, a good when we are still having our brain is not so tired, but having very intensive working several hours or whole day is sometimes tiring, and in the end of the day, people start to be, let's say, tired, and then they are not so productive, and that's one thing. But of course, if it's then depending on if people are very enthusiastic about things and so, then maybe longer process is good. But sometimes my experience is that have a 2-3 hour workshops and something between is more productive than having 1 day workshop, just 6 hours, because sometimes people things just mature in between. That we have a first 3 hours, and then we ask people to think through, get some experience, test something, and then come back and have other 3 hours, and that way, the process is let's say more productive, because there is also this time element. And then what kind of place do we have? Is it online, or do we have a physical space? What equipment we need, technology? We go pre-testing that we know what kind of space is it, and be there early enough by yourself to make sure, because sometimes there is surprises that there is some kind of space booked, nobody has been there, fixed tables or something like that. We have planned to have very, let's say, open discussions, and then the auditorium is not fitting to that purpose, and then we have to somehow adjust. And so I think it's very good to also make sure that we know the place, and also go there, have a rehearsal if possible. But okay, now having all these details depends on the complexity and how the challenging the situation is, what kind of group, how large group you are having, and so forth. But I think this kind of preparation is the first thing we have, that we are prepared, and be prepared by ourselves. That thinking that okay, if I know that I have a tendency to get enthusiastic, or this is an issue where I know a lot, so how to be prepared that I don't start to solve the problems by the group, for example. Or otherwise, if I know that I might have there's a risk that there is this kind of conflictual, or let's say different opinions, that can be tensions, how to be prepared for that. And this kind of things. But we have our different strengths, and so that's what we have to be prepared. And of course, it's also that we ourselves are not tired, and that we have a good kind of good resources and we are well rested before the workshop, because it's also demanding to be on stage. Okay, then getting started. I think every situation, every social process, it's good to have a good start. And we are pretty often we have a hurry to rush in the content, and we don't set the stage adequately. And taking adequate time for starting. So who are we? Warm up, noticing others, becoming personal present, and making agreement. How do we work today? And put aside laptops and make a concentrated situation, for example. So agreeing the purpose and names, why are we here? Agreeing the ways of working, methods, values, principles, and roles and boundaries as well. And we can agree here. I sometimes do it so that when there is an organization, there's a leader who is ordered to facilitation or a consultation. I ask them to really to empower me to lead the situation, and that's also very kind of symbolic that now the leaders say that okay, Jari can now lead the situation, and we are just participants. In a way that I can also set boundaries to leaders. That okay, now Pentti, you have been talking quite a bit, so would you like to listen what others are saying the same thing about the same thing, for example? And then I think it's sometimes important also, depending on the situation, but to connect what we are now going to talk to your previous experience and knowledge, what we know already, because that creates sometimes that the feeling that people are capable already, and they have a good knowledge about the thing. And I think that's part of the appreciation, but it also creating a feeling where we feel ourselves capable, competent participants. Because sometimes we use methods, or it can be we use words that people don't know, and I think it's very, very good to have this kind of connection to previous knowledge and experience. And then, of course, connecting to workshop, to organization context as a whole, how this serve our strategy, and discussing that. So, and this can warm up or setting a stage, of course, depending on how much time we have, and this can be a very kind of short thing, but somehow becoming present. I think it's always, and agreeing the boundaries and ways of working, and the outcomes or purpose. And then maintaining the flow, keeping up the rhythm, action versus pauses that we have planned, that we have certain things, but we have breaks, involving, including people in a procedural way, which means that we are kind of seeing what's happening, because there's always more active people and less active people in many workshops, that there's balance between these two. Being sensitive with concerns and issues of interest, so that we might have a idea, or we should have an idea that, okay, these are the issues we have to discuss, but then suddenly some issue that we think that this was just normal thing takes more time, that we should have a flexibility, not just cut that it was just 5 minutes for this issue, but if you see that, okay, this is now something we have to discuss more, then we can take more time to that, and in our mind reduce some other moments, or then say change the agenda, or propose that, okay, now it seems that this issue is we have to discuss this through before we can go further. Let's make this kind of change in our agenda. And then, of course, sometimes it happens that there is unfruitful, unconstructive debate or interventions. So I think this kind of constructive approach and appreciative stance is good to agree on. And then we can also cut this kind of, let's say, aggressive or unconstructive debate, and ask it, okay, now I have a feeling that this is not maybe building further or adding value, this debate, what do you think? And sometimes it's also that somebody is taking states and arguing his or her arguments or agenda and pushing that. I would like to say this, I would like to say that. And one kind of method to cut is, it's okay, good that you say. I'd like to ask what others think about this, and putting others to say, is this now interesting or important thing? And so expanding the view, and then putting that person to listen what others think about that. So that's one way we can do it in a, let's say, constructive way. That it's not just one person's agenda which is pushed, but we take more collective view, what's important, and how we take that what was stated. And then there's sometimes we get stuck, so we should help them to move and find options, find new ways of seeing the issues. And sometimes it's not just that we solve the problem, find a solution, but when we generate more understanding and also see it, okay, maybe this is something we can't solve today, but okay, now we have discussed it, let's remember this and continue next time. And so that's something that when we are having many issues on agenda, if we get stuck, then we can agree on that we generated ideas, but then we put that aside and continue maybe later in next workshop, if possible. And then there can be frustration and agony, as well as enthusiasm and joy, and how to channel that emotional energy to serve the purpose, so that we hear the frustration and agony. Okay, now it seems that there is this raised emotions. Would you like to say something about that? But then, when we have heard that, then what do you think we should do with that? And so, and quite often people are quite happy when they can say something, but then we can ask what to do with that, and what is the idea. And then when leadership is in place, so that there is a boss or upper leader, so we have to respect that and support the leadership in place, because we can't replace. Sometimes it can happen that facilitation take the leader role, and then we fall out of the role, that we are not the leaders of the organization, and there is temptations in the change process sometimes that can be happen, but we should be aware of that risk. And I already talked about maintaining the feeling of competency among the participants, that they can solve the problems, that they know enough, and they can learn. And so that's something I really see as important. Then they get committed and engaged more strongly. And finally, closing and reflection. So that's something what we don't take again. If we don't start and have adequate warm-up, then we don't spare time for closing and reflection adequately. And I would argue that it's always time to have a closing, where we assess the outcomes, compare to expectations. Okay, that was our aim, we received this, what do you say about that? But then reflecting on the experience, personally and collectively. How was this experience for you? And what was meaningful, and how are we feeling now? And agreeing on the next steps. What will happen? What are the next actions? Who will be in charge? What will happen? Again, personally, collectively if needed, but in a way that there is some continuation, that it's not left open, that okay, let's agree some later stage, because that can happen, that there is no such later stage. So here are now some basic elements of the facilitative process. Its elements: good preparation, starting, maintaining flow, and then closing a reflection. And keeping in mind that there is this kind of where we can add probability for successful experience and outcomes. And then, of course, there's a lot of exercise needed. So now 2 minutes, or let's say 1 minute. Take a moment and think, what would you like to emphasize or highlight in your forthcoming sessions, workshops, as a facilitator or as a participant, to ensure good experience for all? So what are your ideas at the moment? How to make a workshop as good experience for all? And then we'll go to groups to discuss. Okay, maybe we have had a minute, and now it's time to go our second group talk. So have a dialogue in the same 3 or 4 person groups. What will you emphasize in your personal facilitation practice and process in the future? So what do you think based on this? So agree who will start, listen carefully what the other persons say, so that take care that everybody have a moment to say, and try to do so that when somebody has been talking, when you continue, you connect your own talk to previous ones, so that, okay, as you said, then I will now add this and that, or agree on that, and have a final reflection. How was the experience? How were you able to generate and maintain a dialogic moment? So that's now listening exercise and connecting exercise at the same time, that we listen carefully and then we just connect our talk to previous talks and then summarize and write short notes about your experience, chat. So how was the talk? And now this is this kind of dialogue experience. And let's have a 12 minutes, not 15, but 12 minutes, 10 to 5, we will be back and try to adopt this kind of dialogic listening stance and share your personal thoughts. So, Chiara, you can put people in groups. All right, I guess we are back. Hope you had a good dialogue. And if you don't mind, please put your comments. How was the experience in chat? But is anyone willing to say something about it? Was there some kind of dialogue in your group? Did you manage to generate good listening experience and then connect it? Katarina, please.
Hi, we had a kind of a dialogue or discussion. I was thinking in the end, like, or we were kind of trying to reflect also on what we have discussed, but basically we were trying, to utilize some of the facilitation competences, like, for example, building on each other's point, like responding to what previous person talked about, kind of, continuing the conversation and trying to be also inclusive. So active listening, so giving a chance to speak to everyone, like paying attention also to what others are saying. And we discussed also like some of our experiences, like seeing or observing facilitation projects. So, but what kind of good recommendations for a good facilitator would be, like, to stay neutral, as you already told before. So to have a clear agenda and so to remain inclusive for everyone.
Okay, sounds that you managed to have a good productive conversation in that sense. Okay, thanks, Katarina. And Anna, you have raised your hand.
Yes, so with Kia, Carl, and Julia, we had a discussion about safe and secure environment, because I mean, this is something that at least I have encountered many times, because I'm actually very comfortable with change, that there are a lot of individuals in organizations that are not comfortable with change at all. Yes. And therefore creating that environment where they know that they are not going to lose any of their, let's say, privileges or so, but the digitalization, for example, during COVID, that created that kind of change environment where people had to take on a lot of new knowledge and skills and maybe manage new teams in a new environment. So you could see that emotional leadership again, and in that facilitation type of leadership, as Carl said, where, that communication across the board is open and safe is even more important in bringing in all the stakeholders.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Anna. And I think this what I had to add to this list as well, and emphasize it, is this psychological safety, and that in change, especially in change situation, that there is sense of security and change, because it's. But on the other hand, it's also that sometimes we have to change, that we have to adopt new methods, and we have to accept that the old way of working is not valid anymore. But how to do that in a way that people are in a way engaged. And here there's a lot of emotions involved quite often. Okay, thank you for sharing this. And now there's a couple of things in chat I would like to respond. So it's about this large group and how many facilitators. Of course, I think doing facilitation in pairs, it's very, very good opportunity if you have the resources to do that, because then in a pair work we can have a good support from each other, and then we can have a combination where the other person is more, let's say, people participation oriented, another person maybe more tool and structure oriented, and that can be a good combination. In pair work, it's utmost important that that facilitators really have a good agreement to support each other, that they are not starting to compete who's more competent here on the stage or something like that, because that can all sometimes happen. And when we talk about a facilitative work, it's quite often, of course, as was mentioned here, that it's a leader's job. If we have a project leader, and so we can adopt kind of facilitative way of leading the workshop, and no kind of neutral external facilitator is needed. I think that's in most cases that's the case. Or the facilitator can also be some from inside. But then, of course, when we are in this touchy issues, the neutral position is often better. Then we have used that as when we're neutral, we can ask questions more open-minded, and we don't have our own stake on the situation. And then this temporary group and facilitation, I think it's good to agree on roles. And do we need some special facilitative role, or is it the leader who can run the show in that sense? So I think it's good to discuss. Okay, good stuff here again, and then I will now take the chat results and put them as a part of the slide. So because I think there's good stuff there, quite a bit. But now I think it's time to take a look what will happen next in your next exercise. And this time it's a little bit different. So compared to your previous one. So it's a kind of reflective dialogue on your course experience so far. So the idea is that that you have to prepare by making your personal recap on the course experience so far. So how have you been working? What has suited to you, and what's your benefits, and so forth, what you have learned. And then the exercise is to have 2 kind of 15-minute coaching style, sparring style discussions, so that in first, the other will serve as a listener, helper, while the other will reflect on the personal course experience and insight so far, so that we take this kind of listener stance, and not sharing that I have the same, but really listening, asking more, what has been meaningful, and so forth, to help the other to make sense of the course experience so far. And as a coach, you have to concentrate on listening and making supportive questions, and don't share your own experience when listening the other. So not this kind of normal conversation where we start sharing, I have the same and I have this and that, but really asking more. And then change roles and have another conversation. And then after that, have a reflective discussion and share your experience, as is how you were able to have a helping conversation. So where the questions could and deepen the meaningful or the experience what you have had so far. And write a personal memo, max 1 page, of your discussion experience. How was it to be a coach? How was it to be a client? What did you learn, realize personally from the exercise? So this is now continuing this dialogue exercise, but also concentrating on being helpful, taking a stance that you ask good questions, and good questions are open and that they help a person to take another view. And you can also focus on your future as a facilitator if you choose. But 15 minutes, that's now a possibility for you to reflect on 15 minutes your own experience and also future if you choose. And so take this advantage. And 18th May. So the same way, submit your reflection report. And now we are in our boundary. Next week, tools, sprints, workshop, canvases. So more tools and attendance. I think you know all that already. So reading slides, recordings will be in Medium. And I will provide also some further readings later, so that you will find them later. But now we are finished. Thanks for your attendance, participation, activity, and hope there was value added from this lecture on your facilitation course as well. But have a good week, have a good exercise, and see you next week. And Risto will be on board on stage then as well. Okay. Bye-bye.